Welcome to Margin of Thought, where we make space for the questions that matter. I'm your host, Priten, and together we'll explore questions that help us preserve what matters while navigating what's coming. Today, I get to talk to Joel Sohn, Deputy Head of School at Head-Royce, a K-12 independent school in Oakland, California. Head-Royce serves about 920 students, and Joel brings a leadership perspective shaped by teaching, edtech, curriculum design, and school-wide change. We talk about AI, trust, school policy, student concerns, teacher judgment, and why relationships still sit at the center of education. The central question we address is very simple. How can schools use AI without letting it replace the human work of learning? Let's get started.
Joel Sohn. I'm the deputy head of school at Head-Royce School. It is a K-12 one campus independent school in Oakland, California. We have about 920 students.
I'd love to start with this. I sometimes like to ask my guests what is their first and earliest memory of edtech usage themselves as a student.
As a student, I will say it was the calculator. I remember there were two calculator products I had. One was like this old pocket Casio that my father, who was in the Coast Guard Academy and an engineer in the Coast Guard Academy, um, gave me as a device to use. But he was very insistent that I not use it to kind of quote unquote, I think, cheat on homework. This was when I was little. I must have been like, I swear, this must have been like fourth or fifth grade for me. And so I remember that and being like, oh, this is a very precious thing. But the other little ed tech tool that I really was drawn to was Little Professor. And I don't know if you remember this calculator-like thing, which was a mathematical toy calculator. It must have come out in the mid to late 70s. And I think it was supposed to be not a calculator in the classical sense, like, oh, 9 times 9 is 81. It would ask you questions and then you had to type. So I think it's called like a backwards functioning calculator. And you had to type in the answer. So it would give you a series of questions like, 8 divided by this, and you would have to figure it out. And I remember this vividly because I always kept it in my lunchbox for some reason. And then one day, silly me, I put it in my lunchbox next to like a ice cream sandwich and then went off to play. Like absolutely ruined. But I remember that. And I always thought it was like an owl because it kind of looks like it has the face of an owl, but it was supposed to be a professor.
Interesting. There reminds me of like Mr. Spell, which also does a similar thing where it like says words and you have to spell them out, where it's like prompting you rather than you're prompting it. So tell us a little bit about your journey to your current position. How did you get to school leadership?
I sort of got into school leadership based upon my ability to be calm, my ability to take a step back and reason through things, to see a much bigger picture, to see beyond myself. And and then I was asked to step into school leadership. People tapped me for things and said, "You would be good at X. You should do that." That is in terms of formal leadership, like senior level administrative roles. All along the way, I was doing leadership in the way of mentoring fellow teachers, helping develop curriculum, thinking about what innovative curriculum looks like. I was one of the early people to adopt Google Classroom. My spouse at the time was like, I'm going to use Google Classroom. You should use Google Classroom. I was like, what is Google Classroom? She was so good at it. I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And then I also used, before it went defunct, iTunes University. And so I was creating courses and books and interactive materials on iTunes U for my students to engage in. And then that led to me presenting on it at a national conference, and then me being recognized by the National Association for Independent Schools about a teacher of the future. And then that just started a series of conversations about what my leadership trajectory was. And I think having mentors all along the way that pushed me and said, you should definitely look at this, or you should definitely go in this direction, was really impactful.
Yeah. So we're swimming around the topic today, but before we get directly to it, we're triangulating it from a lot of different angles. I wanted to ask what drove you to want to use Google Classroom and iTunes University? Like, what was the appeal of using those tools at that time?
So I'm an English teacher, and I think writing is a craft much more about process than product. The process of drafting a story, revising it, of puzzling through it, having other people give you feedback on it, taking that feedback, incorporating it, rejecting it, discerning, did they really understand what I was going for? For me, that was really rewarding. And it's really time consuming and impossible to track. I mean, when I graduated with my degree, I had a laptop, but I still had like a brother word processor. And I was typing things out and printing it, photocopying it, collecting a dozen to 14 different people's feedback, synthesizing it, keeping their comments. And so, one 20-page short story has an entire box of drafts and notes and things. And I was like, there's got to be an easier way. And when Google Documents came out and then Google Classroom came out, I was like, oh, like this would solve so many of those issues where a student is like, what were you saying again? Like, where did that comment go? Or and you're like, did you not track that? Did you lose that document? Oh gosh, we lost the homework and now we have to start over. And I think for me, I was looking for the classic ed tech solution to a problem I was facing as a teacher. And that seemed like an easy way to stay organized, to have the kids give one another feedback, to give me feedback, and for me to track where they were going. And it was about lifting up the process and rather than the product. And I've always been big on that. Can I capture your thinking? Can I see your thinking? Great.
All right, we're going to speed ahead from Google Classroom to 2023. We're skipping a lot in between, I'm sure, but I'm curious to hear a little bit about when AI first fell on your radar and how it landed there.
Oh, AI first landed. I first became aware of it during the COVID year. Like, okay, artificial intelligence, kind of as we think of it as an LLM, I was aware of it during the COVID year. And at that time, I was an upper school head in Seattle, and I was simply managing trying to get people back into a building and have relationships with kids. But that very next year, so the 21-22 school year, we had to sit down with the history department, with the English department, and start tackling the concern that they were having that AI was already infiltrating their craft. And it was interesting for me because I think the questions that they initially had were akin to the questions that teachers had when we discovered the internet was this powerful tool, or when graphing calculators were going to ruin math education forever. And I was like, oh, this sounds very familiar. And the teachers came to me and said, we should ban this. And I said, ooh, ah, I've never been in favor of just blanket bans. I am one to ask, what are we trying to manage here? What is truly at the heart of your concerns? And if the only thing that you keep coming back to me is cheating and plagiarism, then I think we have a problem about pedagogy and assessment and education in general, and not about AI. This is not an AI question. And so we had to kind of take a step back and have conversations about what is our philosophy about the meaning, the purpose of writing education, about the purpose of assessments and writing. How do you know what is truly authentic or not in writing? What is an original thought? And I was like, I've kind of evolved in my thinking around what is originality. And they're like, well, original, that's the height. And I was like, okay, is it like, are you sure? Because Shakespeare was definitely cribbing from other people. So what do we like, what are we talking about? What is the level of originality you want? But I had to have those conversations, and then that has carried on since. And then here at Head-Royce, when I came in, I think the conversation really exploded once, once OpenAI offered ChatGPT basically for free. And I took a couple educators to the Schools of the Future conference in Honolulu, and I said, I need you to come with me. You're going to learn a little bit about AI there. They were like, okay, well, we don't like AI. We don't want to use AI. By the end of the conference, they were sitting on the plane playing with AI and being like, I had no idea that I could organize my entire lesson and do all of these things with it to better help each individual student by plugging some things into AI. And it would like this has saved me weeks and months of a unit plan. I was like, yeah, that's why you should use it carefully, but in that capacity. Like you are already an expert, but you're like, gosh, this one kid I can't reach, but I know they want this thing. How might I design this unit a little bit better for that particular kid? Boom, it's done. They're like, oh no, like I didn't know it was this good. It's like, yeah, there's ways for you to play with this. And so that actually helped us have kind of two tech AI champions who are showcasing it to their peers who were like, hey, this is exciting. We should get on this and have the conversations. And so that our ed tech director could kind of come in and say, all right, let's shape some conversations. And then what are we going to do about that? And so we've had a long, deliberate, and intentional process of exposure, curiosity, test out, let them be the champions of it and being excited about it. And then that helps us develop. Now we have a philosophy. Now we have a platform. But it's been interesting. I am amazed at what's happening with it right now, too.
Yeah, it is different to hear somebody who's approached it from the positive from the early stages of it. I think a lot of times I do hear conversion stories of folks who were very hesitant and very scared. But I think as they kind of gone along, there was a acceptance phase, or there was a, oh, this is actually a really amazing phase. But it sounds like you approached it from that positive mindset from the get-go. So you went from hesitant teachers to a few teachers became champions. When did the transition happen from like, oh, this is something that some teachers will have professional development on, to we need like a school-wide approach to this?
So it took about a year. I'm a backwards planner. I can see where this is going. We need to be planful. So I'm going to do my good, UBD design principles and say, if the goal is this, then here's all the steps for me to get the students there. And the students are the adults. So when I came in the fall of 23, I already knew there were some conversations, but there was already kind of fear and apprehension. My goal was school-wide policies, school-wide philosophy, school-wide adoption of the adult side first. And so I knew, okay, I need to have the conversations and figure out who I can build relationships with, who are early iterators and innovators of just curriculum in general, because they have the flexibility and the mindset to know education can look different. And so that took a while. So that took me about a year to identify those people, took them to the conference. That was in the fall of 24. And then from there, they came back. And so within the year, had by the end of the year, our first policy and philosophy statement and approach. And, we used Leon Furze's kind of framework as our early framework of here's kind of where we're thinking adults should be. Then we investigated, okay, if that's where we believe we're going to go, then which tool allows us to have that for our adults? And which tool does that allow us to have that for our students in a way that is protective, doesn't cause harm, and is trackable for our teachers? And so that's when we decided to start opening up those pathways. So we, because we're a Google school, we landed on that suite. We already had it embedded with their new workspace stuff. They were opening those pathways up. So we said that's approved. It protects our information. And then on the student side, we used a product that we decided that's a good product. Like it's going to protect our kids and our teachers can see everything and shape things, and it won't give the kids easy answers. So, from them being excited to having the philosophy about a year, but when I came in the fall of 23, that's when the conversation actually happened about starting the process and planting the seeds and having the conversations. I think for any school leader, you have to be mindful that change is a 2 to 3 year trajectory. And so if 3 years from now you want something to look a certain way, what are the steps along the way that you have to do to get there? I think my initial worry was I knew the rate at which AI was changing and the capabilities of AI was changing. And so I was a little concerned that by the time we get to 2027 or the end of 2026 school year, if we don't have that in place, we're going to be so far behind because it's going to have changed so rapidly. But I would rather move by building the trust of the team and to build the habits and mindsets to be flexible and nimble and responsive rather than reactive, rather than just try to push it forward as quickly as possible. And so the trust piece had to be there first. And I think that actually helped me now accelerate the change with the new policy, with the rollout. And we're just presenting to families who are excited about it.
So I was going to ask about you've talked about the role of getting like trust built with the educators. How did you navigate the relationship and conversations with students and parents?
We kind of trickled that out, right? So test it out in a classroom, signal to those kids, hey, we're going to pilot an AI unit. This is what the unit's going to look like. Here's the platform we're using, so the teachers could message that home and the teachers could have conversations with the kids about it. And the only time we're going to do this is within the confines of this class. And here's why and here's how. And then to play with it and then to get their feedback, right? And there were definitely moments where some of the teachers were kind of going in a too experimental phase, and the kids gave them feedback like it just feels like all we're doing is AI, and we're not actually interacting with the teacher. So the connection piece was dropping. And so we needed to say, okay, then that's a good metric for us. So it needs to be discrete. It needs to have a purpose behind the task associated with why do I do this particular task with AI rather than just do a Google search and figure things out on my own. And so that has sharpened the tool there for our teachers to communicate the whys behind when we use it or not. That also helped shape the philosophy statements that we had. The communication to the families was, let's kind of do a drip campaign of, hey, teachers are using this. Hey, we've adopted this new, policy. Hey, here's what we're thinking about. Hey, come watch a conversation about it for the evening and learn more and engage in it. And all along, what I was doing was having sidebar conversations with certain family members who were well connected in the community, who are also in the field, tangentially in the field. We're close enough to Silicon Valley that we have a lot of tech people so that they could signal to their other friends that are sending kids to our school, like, oh no, if you talk to Joel, they're definitely thinking about it. This is what they're doing. At the same time, I was really fortunate to get connected to the Anthropics higher ed GTM team and talk to them about what are you doing at Northwestern? What are you doing at the London School of Economics? How are you seeing things happening there? And then once we had the conversation, it was nice because they were like, actually, you're kind of further ahead than the universities are. because they don't have a plan. They're playing catch up and we're helping them play catch up. And so that felt good. Like, oh, we're actually in a good position and we don't need to feel like there's a competition to be the first to announce and all these things because we definitely have some of the Bay Area schools that are, hey, we've done this and we're doing this and like we've got the answers. And I'm like, no, no one has the answers. We're all figuring it out. Like anytime we've a brand new quote unquote ed tech tool has come out. And we have to be careful about saying we know what we're doing. I know that we know what we're doing in terms of being intentional, planful, slow, and deliberate. But other than the decision of which platform or how is it going to be used in this particular, no, like that's still got to be puzzled through. And I think as long as you're honest with families about that, they're happy to know that you're dealing with it, that you're not just burying your head in the sand.
So tell us a little bit about what the policy and philosophy look like in terms of the kinds of questions you knew you had to answer with those statements and how you ended up approaching coming up with preliminary ideas on it as things continue to adapt.
Again, I think the conversation initially began with what don't we want students to have access to and what don't we want them doing? And I asked our ed tech director and our director of technology person to kind of start the conversation is around what is our mission, vision, and values? How does that connect to AI? And knowing that this is a tool that's here to stay, what is our approach to any massive disruption to the educational landscape? And then that will help us drive forward these conversations. There was this belief that we needed a plagiarism policy or like an anti-AI policy. And I was like, policies, those are legal things. Yes, you need a policy for professional behavior in the school. I think we need a philosophy, an approach to how we tackle the question of AI and the use of AI. And so they heard that and they were working with this group of educators who volunteered to be a tech advisory group to tackle this question. So as they puzzled through it, a lot of the conversation landed around what are the clear guidelines and sandbox boundaries we want for both adults and students. We are a school, and so if the tool shortcuts the learning, then we don't want it. And so that had to somehow be part of the philosophy that we believe the reason why you choose an independent school, the reason why you choose us as your independent school is you believe in community first. You believe that the connection between the student and the teacher is so invaluable that you're going to invest this time and energy here. And so how do we do that with knowing that this tool can sometimes shortcut that? Or the belief is that the tool can sometimes shortcut that. And so we had to approach that question with the educators. I think where we are landing is that the reality is, in many ways, an adult, an educator using AI can actually enhance the relationship that they have with the student because it's providing them with more input about that student's learning. And so our expectation moving forward is that teachers are aware of it, experimenting, and starting to dabble with it in ways that are powerful for them in helping them do the work that they need to do. On the student side, when we started to have the conversation about the students, we wanted to be clear with them when is it appropriate to use in what ways. You have a question about something that you're like, well, is this a legitimate, can you help me shape this? That's probably more okay than I can't figure this out, tell me how to do it. And so we have to have those levels and to share with the students, this is when we would expect you to be able to, and when we would hope that the challenge of puzzling through something, right, is the learning. the process of sitting with challenge and not knowing and the struggle is the value of learning. So how are you going to preserve that in an age of AI when it can shortcut that? And so as long as you message that to students and as long as you're willing to tell students this is what we're holding you to and this is why you've chosen us as an institution, I think they see value in that. I will say it is interesting because a couple of years ago, I would say I think students were a little bit more experimental, and I still think students are experimenting with it, doing things. But now they're far more anti-AI than even just 2 years ago. I think they're just kind of like, whoa, there's too much. I think this generation is also very concerned about the ethical considerations of AI. Are we sure we're not feeding money to corporations that are doing evil? Are you sure we're not killing the environment? Are you sure this is safe and private for us in terms of the information we're sharing? And so I think they are concerned and we're seeing less of it. And I think part of it also is because some educators, not just here, but all over, are kind of sloppy and are lesson planning in sloppy ways and then giving kids AI generated lessons without doing the human and the machine thing and saying, oh, wait, that makes no sense. That's not at all what I even asked them to do. So if they see this, they're going to be able to tell this was AI generated. And even that is that important? Should you tell the kids that you used it? Like, and I'm like, yeah, like you should. And you should say, and I double checked it and this is how I edited it. Because I think that offers kids more trust that you are a responsible user and that you are understanding that they have concerns about it too. So it's been a long process to get to where we are about lifting up our philosophy. Here's some levels of don't use it to you should feel free to use it and the whys behind it. But I would say we're going to have to revisit that next year. Like I'm already, oh shoot, I just saw that Gemini, because we have Google Workspace, that Gemini is now fully embedded in our Google Workspace. And I didn't think it was by default now. And so I was like, wait, what is going on? So I asked Gemini, I was like, what are my top priorities this week based upon my inbox just to see? And then I was like, oh no. So I had to ask our director of tech, can you please to make sure like this is not open to students, this is not open, like where are our guardrails? And so we're examining that now. But yeah, I mean, I know we're gonna have to revisit this philosophy next year. And so it's gonna be on the docket for the summer work.
The docket seems to always be getting larger and larger. I think, the GPT 4.5 came. I mean, just like there's something every single day and at least one major thing every week. But so a lot of the things you talked about, I think when we speak to different schools, I think folks are hoping for some real clear, concrete things. And I think it's hard for folks to digest that we're not going to have like the equivalent of like our plagiarism policies from the pre ChatGPT era where there was really clear guidelines and it said, okay, like this is how we're going to detect it, this is how we're going to enforce it, this is what the consequences are if you do it once, this is the consequences if you do it twice, right? Like we had really concrete plagiarism policies for the last few decades, especially post-internet. And I think folks want something similar when they think about AI. It's like, okay, teachers are allowed to use it to do lesson plans, but not grade. Like they are looking for all of that to be codified. It sounds like y'all have not approached it that way. I know you talked a little bit about the originality piece and why that wasn't appealing to you, but in terms of codifying feedback and codifying like in-class usage, what made you feel comfortable at adopting a philosophy statement as your primary response and not the super granular rulebook?
Okay, because I have the experience of the dress code policy, right? Like the more granular you get, the more the only thing you're thinking about is the violation and not the person. The more, and then there's more worry of the oversight of each. There's no way for you to predict all the possibilities of how this is going to be used. And so you can't get granular with it. You can't be like, in this situation only is it. No, there's no such thing as that. And I think we have to also, I think one of the beauties of working in an independent school in particular, but in an educational institution in general, is that the goal of the school is to educate people to be critical thinkers and intentional thinkers for no matter what conundrum appears in the future. AI is a conundrum. It has fundamentally challenged the purpose, I think, for a lot of people of education. It doesn't think it's giving you the predictive test. It thinks in a machine way. But okay, so why are you so upset? And that is the puzzling I need you to do. And that is why we have a philosophy, because it helps you puzzle through when is it okay for me? And I have to then make value judgments based upon a case by case basis in my own situation. Because what I do in the math class versus what I do in history class versus what I do in an English class is going to be so different that there is no way for us to write the list of things down that is forbidden or the list of things down that is acceptable. We have to also trust that our educators are actually experts and know in their heart the right things to do. Like, this is the right thing. Like, this is when it's okay. And I know that because I have a relationship with this student and I know what their intentions and beliefs are around this and why they would turn to this tool and do that. And that is great. And I also think, though, what I am someone that loves exploring the ethical considerations of and our own ideologies behind things like originality of thought, right? Like, how do you define creativity? What does it mean to be an embodied full human in a school that is technically a system trying to push you through? And the more we're open that that is why we're here in these communities, then the more good work that you put upon the adults to do with the kids. If you have a policy, it's protective that the adult cannot have the relationship and just say, oh, here's the policy. And that defeats the purpose of education. So yeah, we're talking about tech, but we're talking about relationships. Education is about relationships. It's like walking alongside somebody and saying, I know you, I feel you, this is where you're going. And I know who you are before you do, even sometimes. And it's like, okay, so then it's okay for them to use this in this manner. Because what is going to change is how we do school, but what's never going to change is the importance of school. So, yeah, that's just why I don't believe. Yeah, people have asked to see our policy. Can you show us what your? Yeah, it's going to mean nothing to you because it's so vastly different than your own community. Every community has its own ethos, and you have to rely on your community to generate it. Otherwise, it's not going to resonate with you.
Wow, you just captured a lot of different things that I think I struggle to communicate sometimes because I think people are looking for those, and right, people are scared, people are overwhelmed, and so I think that there's this feeling that like, oh, something concrete will be the best option. And so like the number of times where someone's like, oh, like what is should every school ban cell phones or not? Like, I mean, bans are. I share your sentiment about bans in general, but it's like it might vary. Like so much, right? Like so much of it's context dependent because education is so vastly different. I think it's hard because that leaves so much ambiguity in conversations like this, but in a conversation that's already full of ambiguity, I think it's tough for people to get around. But I think, hearing stories like yours where you're able to build some community norms around this and community philosophies around it so that you can all approach this together seems like the direction we as a like education community, nationally, globally need to move, because these same exact kinds of conversations could be happening about state level policies, district policies, like national policies, global norms about these things without necessarily codifying every single thing as a rule and regulation, right? Like we can be asking the right questions without necessarily pretending we have all the answers. And that definitely seems like what the approach that you all have adopted. Before we wrap up, I am curious about you. You brought up the shift in student perspectives since from 2023 to 2026, and we're definitely seeing this massive change in secret usage for trying to get around things to asking really important questions about the implications of the technology. We're also hearing some fear from the students about what this means for their own career choices, especially when you get to the 9 to 12 and in higher ed. I think students are a little bit more concerned about what job opportunities will make sense. What should I major in? What classes are going to still be relevant? That's a compound question. So why don't we start with the first part? How do you answer those students who are bringing up qualms about the ethical concerns? And how does that manifest in a classroom, for example, where a teacher has found a particular usage that they think is productive pedagogically, but they have like 5 students who say, look, I have ethical qualms with this, and so I don't want to use it. Like those are scenarios that I find really tricky right now to help folks navigate.
We have a computer science teacher who is currently getting their master's in AI and has talked openly about how they use it, when they use it, what purposes does it serve, but also has talked openly with the students about, is this going to take coding jobs? Is this going to change your trajectory? Is this something you need to learn? Or are you going to not learn it because you have these ethical considerations? And then what is the position that you hold that makes you feel like that's okay? And so I think this teacher has done such a good job around raising those considerations for the students that they feel comfortable saying, I would not use it because of X. But to also at the same time be challenged by the teacher to understand that what if you had right? There's like, if the global economy is suddenly run on this thing, and if all computer coding jobs disappear, how are you going to say you reject this? Because you say you reject it, but it's in your pocket, it's in your bank account, it's in your car, it's everywhere, and you don't necessarily think of it as AI because you yourself are not putting in a task, but it's still impacting you. That is the approach that we have taken, is always to elevate the conversation and to complicate it, to give it its full context and complications. One, I think, we're an independent school, right? And so tuition itself is an exclusionary factor in many ways. And so you don't want kids leaving here with a false sense that this is the reality of the rest of the world, because it's not. Is it a microcosm of part of the world? Yes, it is. But to give them a fuller picture and to grapple with deep, complex issues is the point of school. And it sounds like in this particular class, it's like, but that's a CS class. Yes, shouldn't they be learning coding? Yes, but they should be learning the ethical considerations of, do we use AI or not? What was the impact of computer science on the world in the first place, right? I think about the Artemis 2 mission, and I'm like, okay, that was not possible without computers. That was not possible without advancements in technology that we are now talking about. And it's only going to drive further and further ethical considerations. And so we never want to be complacent about letting kids say, I'm not going to use it, or you have to challenge. When a kid is strident, because kids are strident about their beliefs, you have to push them and say, are you sure? Where is that coming from? Is that coming from a place of privilege? Is that coming from a place of fear? So that the kids can do that own interrogation here in the safety of a school with a trusted adult, so that when they go into a world that's a little less safe and a little more edgy and rapid changing, that they have some skills of in, internalizing those things, thinking about this thing, saying, okay, well, I've dealt with a complex issue before. I can do with another one. And I never want it to be about the tech. I never want it to be about COVID. I never want it to be about whatever our next disruption is going to be, and there's going to be one. I want it to be about the human being able to deal with complexity and be resilient.
I want to end on the note of, you talked about how the way you've approached these questions is the backwards design, and you think about where you want to be in a few years and what you need to do now to get there. What does that look like now? What is next? Where do you want to be in a few years, and what are you doing to get there?
We simplified our mission statement. We had a really long mission statement, and it wasn't necessarily that memorable. And so it's now 9 words that Head-Royce develops students of character, intellect, and creativity. And deliberate choice of those 3 things, because those are 3 things that are truly human, for me at least, that no machine is ever going to replace. And so what's next in the horizon is for us to clearly articulate what we mean by those and how we're going to integrate those in all facets of the school. I think we say, oh, this character piece, like, yeah, that's done in SEL sessions and that's done in advisory. And I'm like, that's not what I mean. Like, character is lifted up in this teacher's CS class that they're asking hard questions about themselves, their relationship to the world. That's character. But we don't always quantify it or say that this is what character education looks like. But I think that's going to be the next thing, is like this character piece, this creativity piece. For me, that's a huge one, especially with AI. I keep going back to like 1999, sitting with a pen and papers. Oh, this student is such an original thinker. And then like now I'm like, were they? Were they really that? They were just synthesizing all the inputs they had over the years. What's the difference between that and a machine doing that? I think I know, but brain science is still evolving. And so it's fascinating to me that we seem to know for a fact, like what's original, what's creative thought. And I'm like, I don't think we've ever been able to know for sure. And so it'll be interesting to me for this school to puzzle through those and define it. So what's coming next? But I actually think that we are better positioned as a school with that mission because despite that AI is here.
I love the idea of trimming a mission statement as a way to move forward. I do, and I think oftentimes this is where like folks write these elaborate things and then they go into their like website and that's it. Like no one's approaching daily decision making from that. It is really nice to hear an example of taking the mission statement not just as like marketing copy or like this board member or recruitment piece, and then daily practice is so disconnected from it because we just don't have the time to ask those questions sometimes. And so being that intentional about starting there, I'm hoping more schools can take that as an example and build on that. But I really appreciate your time today.
So yeah, and again, no one has the answer. We're all just going to puzzle through it together.
Joel helps us remember that AI policy cannot answer every classroom question. Schools need shared values, trusted educators, and space for students to wrestle with complexity. His approach connects directly with our larger question of how schools can navigate what is coming while preserving what matters. For more on how schools can approach ethical decision-making in education, like Joel, order my book, Ethical EdTech, at ethicaledtech.org. Thanks for listening to Margin of Thought. If this episode gave you something to think about, subscribe, rate, and review us. Also, share it with someone who might be asking similar questions. You can find the show notes, transcripts, and my newsletter at Priten.org. Until next time, keep making space for the questions that matter.